All right, let's jump right in. We're about to tackle one of the most, well, epic stories in the entire Book of Mormon, the Allegory of the Olive Tree. Seriously, this is a whole saga packed into one chapter. It covers thousands of years, all through this incredible metaphor about a vineyard and its master, who, you'll see, really cares for it, but also goes through a lot of grief.
So, right off the bat, we get the key that unlocks the entire story. The prophet Zenos, who's being quoted here in the book of Jacob, he just lays it all out. He says the house of Israel, God's covenant people, is like a tame olive tree. Think of tame as cultivated, cared for, cherished. And everything, everything that happens from here on out, it all centers on what happens to this one tree.
Okay, before we get too deep into the weeds, or the vines, I guess, let's get a quick cheat sheet going so you can follow along. It's pretty straightforward. The master of the vineyard, that's Christ. The vineyard itself, that's the world. The tame olive tree, as we just said, is the house of Israel, and the wild branches, those are Gentiles, basically anyone who isn't from the house of Israel. And maybe the most important one, the fruit represents individual people and, their good deeds. Makes sense, right? Awesome. Let's keep going. So picture this. Our story kicks off way back, sometime before 722 BC. The master of the vineyard walks out to check on his beloved olive tree, and he sees a problem. A big one. After all this time, it's starting to decay. The branches are withering, and this is all a symbol for the wickedness that was starting to creep into the house of Israel. Now, the master is heartbroken to see this, but he's not about to give up. No way. Instead, he comes up with a pretty radical plan. It's not just about saving the main tree from dying. It's about making sure its good genetics, its precious fruit, survive for the future. And this first big move? It's all about scattering the branches. So, his plan has four main steps. First, he prunes the tree, cuts off the worst, most wicked parts. Second, he takes off some of the main branches that are starting to die. Third, and this is a big deal, he grafts in wild olive branches, the Gentiles, right onto the main trunk to keep the roots healthy. And finally, he takes the good, healthy young branches and plants them in different places all over the vineyard, hoping they'll grow strong.
And this is where the allegory just clicks with real history. It's amazing. The scattering of Israel's northern kingdom by Assyria and Judah's exile to Babylon, those are seen as the master plucking off those main branches. And Lehi's family heading to the Americas around 600 BC, well, that's a perfect example of one of those good young branches being planted in a totally new part of the vineyard.
Okay, now we're going to hit the fast-forward button. A long time passes, and we land right around the time of Christ and the early apostles. The master comes back to see how his project is going, and what he finds is, well, it's actually pretty good. A bit of a surprise. And what's really interesting here is that the plan seems to have worked, at least at first. The main tree, the one with those wild Gentile branches grafted in, it's producing good fruit. It's like the Gentiles are drawing strength from the original, covenant roots. And at the same time, most of those branches he scattered are also doing great, bearing good fruit too. But if we dig into the details, things get even more fascinating. The 10 tribes in Judah, they were planted in poor spots, tough circumstances, but they still managed to produce good fruit. But Lehi's family, they were planted in a good spot in the Americas, and the results were mixed. It produced both good fruit, the Nephites, and wild, bad fruit, the Lamanites. You can already see the conflict starting to build there. But that initial success, it doesn't last. The story jumps forward again, this time over 1,000 years. And when the master returns this time, oh man, the whole vineyard has just collapsed into corruption. This period is often interpreted as the Great Apostasy. This is really the story's heartbreaking turning point. That conflict we saw brewing in the Americas, it ends in total disaster. By 421 AD, the wild fruit, the Lamanites, has completely overtaken the good, and the Nephite branch just withers away and is destroyed. And this isn't just happening in one spot. This kind of decays everywhere. So the situation is absolutely dire. Every single tree, from the main one with Gentile branches to all the scattered ones, is now only producing bad, corrupt fruit. The entire vineyard is a mess. From the master's point of view, it looks like thousands of years of work have just gone up in smoke. And you can just feel the master's pain in this one question from the text. He weeps, and he asks, "What could I have done more for my vineyard?" He did everything. He cared for it, he nourished it, he grafted and pruned, and it still came to this. It's this powerful, raw moment of grief, and it really sets the stage for one last all-out effort.
So, right when it seems like all is lost, the master and his servant decide they're going to try one last time. This is it, the final harvest, a massive, complicated plan to reverse all the corruption and save the vineyard before the very end.
This last great plan is pretty much a total reversal of the first one. First, they get rid of the absolute worst branches. Then, they take those original, natural Israelite branches that were scattered and they graft them back into the main tree. And at the very same time, they take some of the now wild Gentile branches from the main tree and graft them into the other trees. It's this big mix-up, trying to bring everything back into balance.
And again, you can see how this part of the allegory is tied to more modern events. The world wars are often seen as that plucking of the bitter branches. The Balfour Declaration and the founding of Israel in 1948, that's seen as the start of grafting the natural branches back in. And the establishment of the church back in 1830 is viewed as the calling of new servants to help get all this final work done.
Now get this, because this part is so cool. The gathering happens in the exact opposite order of the scattering. It perfectly fulfills that old saying, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. The scattering started with the 10 tribes and ended with Lehi's family. So the gathering starts with Lehi's descendants, then Judah, and finally the 10 tribes. A perfect reversal.
You know, there's a really interesting detail tucked away in the text here. It says that when the master calls for help with this final, massive job, the servants who show up are few. It really drives home just how huge and difficult the task is, just a small group trying to help redeem the whole world.
But here's the amazing part. Against all odds, it actually works. The servants work side by side with the master, and slowly but surely, the good fruit starts to push out the bad. The whole vineyard gets cleansed, the trees are finally unified, and the fruit becomes good and precious again, just like it was in the very beginning. The restoration is finally complete.
So you'd think that's the end, right? A perfect, happy ending. But hold on, because there is one last, absolutely stunning twist. After all that work, after the vineyard is finally perfect, the master says that the time will come when he will cause the whole thing to be burned with fire.
Which leaves us with this huge, profound question. Why fire? Why end it that way? After millennia of work, of struggling to save and perfect this vineyard, why is the final step to purify it with fire? It really forces you to think about the story's ultimate message. Maybe it's not just about saving the tree. Maybe it's about a final judgment and a complete, maybe even a celestial kind of renewal. What do you think that final act is all about?